Decreased sex drive and fatigue, especially in younger men. These are signs of low testosterone levels.
One of the things you do in behavior therapy constantly is you help people calibrate the zone of proximal development. So imagine that's Vygotsky's term, right? And so if you're in the zone of proximal development, you're pushing your skill development one increment forward. And it's one that you can actually manage. And so if you see people who are entirely stymied, we're sort of back to the cup of coffee or the coffee cup example, you want to find something they can do locally this week that would constitute at least a micro win. Why don't you try cleaning up your room? Because it's a complete catastrophic nightmare. It's a good place to start. This is often the case with people who are really demoralized and whose life is utterly chaotic. So does that mean, does that mean that demotivated men are producing less testosterone?
The data show that repeated failures take testosterone levels lower than they would be otherwise. That is not to say that people with low testosterone will always fail. Those with higher testosterone always win. But just to be clear, because you are correct, but people sometimes get hitched on this causal part. But indeed, one of the quickest ways to boost someone's testosterone is to have them achieve a win.
So you just keep cutting the tasks down week by week until you find the threshold for positive movement forward. And then what's cool about that too is there's a Pareto principle issue associated with it. So if you can find out where the person can start, it isn't linear progress, it's exponential progress forward. And so even if they have to start at a micro level, it doesn't really matter because they get much better at it very, very rapidly as they accrue successes. Maybe that's because they're learning in the way that you described. Okay, so back to the gene regulation. It increases testosterone, the wins, and...
Yeah, so testosterones are associated with winners tend to be able to win more. The steroid hormones are so-called lipophilic, and they can cross from the outside of a cell through the cell membrane to actually into the nucleus of a cell and control gene expression. So when we achieve wins repeatedly, and again, this doesn't matter if you're male or female, you achieve wins repeatedly. Testosterone is the molecule that eventually accesses not just cells to control their immediate physiology, but goes into the nucleus of those cells and controls their gene expression. Ratios depending on your particular life goals, because the ratio of estrogen and testosterone in every individual has profound influence on feelings of well-being, feelings of anxiety or lack of anxiety, on reproduction, on sexual behavior. Having sufficient levels of testosterone is vitally important for brain function, and having sufficient levels of estrogen will allow your brain to actually function. It turns out that estrogen is one of the main ways in which the brain maintains longevity and maintains its ability to think.
It's been established that resistance exercise increases serum concentrations of hormones like testosterone, growth hormone, and IGF-1. And foundational research from the 1990s and early 2000s, led by Dr. Bill Kramer, showed that the higher the training intensity, so training with heavier loads, and the more muscle mass involved in the exercise, so training with compound movements, for example, the more testosterone increase you see. And the reasoning from there was fairly straightforward. Since we know that testosterone is anabolic, aiming to increase it acutely should be weighted pretty heavily when it comes to designing an effective hypertrophy-focused training program. And naturally, I went on believing for several years that the reason why this style of training was so effective for me was that it was jacking up my testosterone. It wasn't until later that I realized that the level of testosterone increase seen with these training modifications just isn't enough to increase muscle growth on its own.
3 proven ways to increase your testosterone levels. Number 1, compound muscle exercise. So bench press, squats, deadlifts, push-ups and pull-ups. Second thing is work out your big muscle groups. So your chest, your back, your quads, as well as your hamstring. Third way, decrease the amount of time between your reps at the gym. So by decreasing that time, it's essentially high intensity interval training, but make sure you don't overtrain. Doing too much or pushing it too far for too long can decrease your testosterone levels.
At 22 years old, your testosterone shouldn't be anything but buzzing, right? That's your term, buzzing, like it's the nervous system. There are a few simple things that you can do. If you do that, if you improve your sleep quality and quantity, that you're going to feel stronger. Your body is going to be more anabolic for a longer period of time. You're more anabolic when you're sleeping, right? Daytime activities are stimulated by catabolic hormones, right? So you've got your adrenaline, you've got your cortisol. These are good hormones for getting your energy up. But when the sun sets and it's time to go to sleep, your body naturally is going to secrete anabolic hormones, testosterone, growth hormone, things of that nature. So what you got to do is maximize the time spent doing that thing.
Things that can raise testosterone in men, and they're quite effective, right? You can lift weights MAPS anabolic style routine it would be perfect for that. You make sure you get good sleep, you manage your stress, make sure that your diet is adequate in both fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Make sure that you're not deficient in any nutrients like zinc or vitamin D, which can lower testosterone levels. And your testosterone raises, and it's at, 350 or 400, and you also feel the effects of low testosterone, then I would seek another hormone doctor, because the low testosterone really hammers your quality of life. It really does, especially at your age. It'll reduce your confidence, your drive. It'll of course lower your libido, and you have health risks. Low testosterone in that range, under 300, has health risks associated with it. So your health risks increase for dementia, for cancer, heart disease, and other types of issues. So if you're trying to raise it and you're doing everything you can, and let's say you double your testosterone, you're still relatively low, and if you've been doing this for about 6 months, I would work with a hormone specialist that are associated with low testosterone, which a lot of men don't know. They don't know. They just think low testosterone means they feel crummy, but you actually increase your risk of long-term disease.
Those three things, keeping your rest sufficient, being well hydrated, and your stress levels are low, then you've got the foundation for an anabolic body.
Deficiencies. For example, a zinc deficiency can lower testosterone, so be sure to eat plenty of foods rich in zinc, like meat, shellfish, beans, and certain nuts. Vitamin D can also regulate testosterone levels, so depending on how much sun exposure you get, supplementation of up to 3,000 IU per day can increase testosterone. There are other supplements that generally have weak evidence supporting them, such as D-aspartic acid, but it only seems to work for 6 to 12 days before levels just go back to normal, and it isn't associated with any body composition changes. Ashwagandha has one study showing a 15% testosterone increase in young, healthy men, but the evidence is otherwise non-existent. He found that reducing sleep from 8 hours to 5 hours per night for 5 days reduced testosterone by 10.4% in young men. A later 2012 study found that reducing sleep from 10 hours to 4 hours for 5 days noted only a trend for reduced testosterone that didn't reach statistical significance. On the other hand, sleep deprivation for 33 hours straight resulted in a 27% average drop in testosterone in 24 young men. Sexual activity seems to play an important role in testosterone regulation. One study published in the Journal of Evolution and Human Behavior showed that simply having a 5-minute conversation with an attractive woman was able to boost testosterone by 30% in men. It could be the case that men and women with higher testosterone are just more likely to want or to be in multiple relationships, not necessarily that having multiple partners increases testosterone, while that remains a strong possibility. Given the variety in lifestyle preferences on this front, perhaps the most generalizable advice is to have regular sex, since testosterone increases after evening coitus in both men and women, while on evenings with no intercourse, testosterone decreases as the night goes by. And for the record, ejaculation by itself isn't associated with changes in testosterone, since the actual ejaculatory process is regulated by serotonin and nitric oxide, not testosterone. Other things worth mentioning that can optimize testosterone levels include de-stressing as much as possible, such as by meditating and relaxing, and avoiding excessive alcohol intake, which has been shown to reduce testosterone.
Boosting foods. And certainly there are foods that might be better to help boost your testosterone, but how much do you need to eat to make a real impact? It's hard to say. So what I tell all my patients is avoid processed foods. Eat natural foods and fruits and vegetables that you find at the supermarket in the produce aisle. Disrupt endocrine action, and testosterone is created through an endocrine process. So being exposed to endocrine disrupting chemicals can actually result in a number of problems. They've been found to be associated with not only low testosterone, but diabetes, obesity, learning problems, and even cancer.
Finish my noon meal, I do force myself to stand up and go outside and take a brief walk. That also gets me again into optic flow. It also has another benefit, which is that I am giving my brain and thereby my body more information about light and time of day, which is always better than less information about light and time of day. So getting that morning light pulse, but then also leaving the house or apartment or workplace and getting out for a few minutes after lunch is beneficial for metabolism, beneficial for nutrient utilization, and beneficial for all the organs and tissues of the body because you're getting that outside light exposure. Have lower than desired levels of testosterone or too much sex hormone binding globulin. It turns out that 400 milligrams per day of something called tongat ali, which is a form of ginseng, can actually help increase levels of free testosterone. Many people experience a positive subjective effect and some objective effects as well, meaning increases in free testosterone when they do blood analysis. Compound that's relevant both to men and women, or I should say people that are trying to optimize testosterone and or estrogen, is Fadogia. Fadogia agrestis is actually an herb that increases the levels of what's called luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone is a hormone that's released from the hypothalamus within the brain that travels to the gonads, either the ovaries or the testes, to stimulate the release of estrogen or testosterone. And Fadogia agrestis has been shown, albeit in a limited number of studies, to increase levels of luteinizing hormone and thereby levels of testosterone and estrogen in ways that some people find beneficial.